I had just graduated college and needed a small place to stay, while I searched for a new job. I worked part-time at a small grocery store, but now that I had graduated, it was time to start looking for a better job. Anyways, apartments were way too expensive to rent on my own, so I was mainly looking for places with spare rooms for rent. I knew it would be awkward for a while living in someone else's house, but I didn't have much of a choice. To be honest, my old roommate from college suggested looking on Craigslist, as most other sites at the time didn't let you post single rooms in a house, or maybe it was just really hard to find them. Either way, Craigslist seemed to have a ton of options to choose from, so I stuck with it. After a few days, though, I started to get frustrated, as none of the people would reply to my requests, and the ones that did would just apologize and say it was already taken. But then, on Saturday morning, a new room popped up. It was nearby, cheap, and looked pretty nice in the description. A man named Tom was advertising it as a large house with a spare bedroom for rent that also had a separate bathroom and closet. This sounded perfect to me, so I emailed him about my interest and then went to work. I knew the listing had just been posted that morning, so I felt confident that I was the first one to contact him. On my lunch break, I checked my emails and Tom had replied, asking me to come and view it that afternoon. I knew I'd be tired after work, but I also really wanted this place, so I agreed, and we set a time. After work, I drove straight there, which was only about 10 minutes away. From the outside, the house looked really nice. It honestly just looked like a regular, medium-sized neighborhood home. I parked on the side of the road and walked up to the door, then lightly knocked. After 30 seconds, I knocked again, a little bit harder this time. A minute later, I pulled my phone out to text Tom, but just before I sent it, he opened the door and invited me in. I immediately noticed he was sweating a lot, as if he had just finished a long workout, and he smelled awful. I didn't want to be rude or anything, so I just ignored it. He began walking me around the ground level, showing me the kitchen and the living room. He mentioned that he didn't use these rooms often, so I wouldn't have to worry about getting in his way. From the look of the rooms, though, it seemed as though he used them too often. Old dishes were piled up in the sink, and the couch had stains all over it. I really didn't like how dirty the whole place was, and it was strange that in the pictures, the house looked really clean. One thing I remembered specifically was that the living room had a brown leather couch in the picture, but the couch that was actually there was black. I figured Tom had probably used pictures of the house from years ago before it sold. I was a bit annoyed at the dishonesty, but all that really mattered was my room, which was upstairs. Tom led the way to the stairs, then stopped when he reached the bottom of the steps and held his hand out in a gesturing manner, as if he wanted me to head up first. I got a weird and uncomfortable feeling. As I started up the stairs, Tom didn't follow me. He stayed at the bottom and smiled, saying that my room would be the first one on the left. I continued to the top and took a couple of steps into the hallway before a soft thud came from behind the door to what was supposed to be my room. I looked back down the stairs at Tom, whose smile was now completely gone. He replied in an annoyed tone, telling me that it was just one of his friends staying the night and not to worry about it. Then he urged me to check out the room for myself, as he was sure that I'd like it. I was definitely pretty nervous at this point, scared even. Why wouldn't he have told me that someone else was here? It seemed like something I should know. Everything started adding up, and all I wanted was to get out of there right away. I tried to act confident and began walking down the stairs as I explained that the place wasn't going to work out for me. He didn't seem to like that answer, and he moved his body to block most of the bottom of the stairs. I stood a couple of steps away and firmly told him that I needed to leave. He asked me again to check out the bedroom, to at least see if I liked it, and again I said I was not interested. He looked at me for a moment. Then, to my surprise, he smiled and said, "Okay," stepping aside. I quickly walked past him and straight out the front door. I don't know what was going on in that house, but something didn't feel right about any of it. I even felt lucky to have been able to leave so easily. In the moment, I thought I was going to have to force my way out. I checked Craigslist a couple of hours later, and the posting had been removed. I still wonder who or what was in that room upstairs. For all I know, it could have just been an empty room, but something tells me that it was something much worse. Craigslist is almost never the first place I go when I need to buy something, but sometimes you can get good deals on things that would otherwise be really expensive. At the time, I was searching for new workout equipment. Weights and machines are really expensive to buy new, so Craigslist was the perfect way to find used ones for cheap. Anyways, I scrolled through the site for a few days before eventually finding a posting that looked really good. It was a set of weights for a pretty good deal and had been posted only a few hours ago. The poster's name was Mary, so I sent her an email and told her I was very interested in her weight set and would like to pick them up as soon as possible. Mary replied just a few minutes later, saying that she was available tonight when she got home from work at 7. It was a little bit late, but it wasn't too big of a deal for me since I wanted them as soon as possible. I agreed, and she responded with her address. Of course, I looked it up to see where it was and what the house looked like. It was 20 minutes away in a small neighborhood that I was actually familiar with, as one of my old friends used to live nearby. The house was regular-sized and didn't have any real defining features, other than the fact that it looked pretty old. But nothing looked too strange or gave me bad vibes. That night, I drove down there. The place was at the end of the road in a cul-de-sac, so I parked on the side of the house by their mailbox and made my way up to the front door, which was already open. I didn't want to just walk into the house, so I knocked on the open door a few times to get their attention. A moment later, a man came down the hall. Supposed to meet with Mary to look at some workout stuff she had posted on Craigslist, I said. The man's face lit up, and he said to come on in. He told me that Mary would be down in a few minutes as she was changing out of her work clothes. This definitely made me cautious, but he sounded genuine and believable, so I followed him into his living room, where there was a set of weights on the ground. However, aside from the weights, there was nothing else in the room, no furniture or decorations at all. I think the man saw me looking around, as he quickly said that they were in the process of moving out, and that's why they were trying to sell the weights. Still skeptical, I looked at them for a second, but immediately noticed that a few plates were missing. "Is this everything?" I asked. "I thought I saw more in the pictures." He smiled again, telling me that Mary might know where the other ones are. But then he just stood there, looking at me. I got really uncomfortable and asked him if he could go check on Mary to let her know I was here. He waited for a moment, then agreed and walked up the stairs. I was obviously beginning to worry that Mary might not even be a real person at this point, so I listened intently to make sure he was talking to someone. After a few seconds of silence, I went over to the bottom of the stairs and looked up toward the top. The man was standing there at the top, just staring at the wall, probably waiting up there to make it seem like he actually went to ask someone. I fell into a panic, knowing now that this was all a lie, and I was likely in the middle of something horrible. I started to quickly walk toward the front door, trying not to alert the man, but as soon as I turned around, I heard heavy footsteps rushing down the stairs. He called out for me to wait as I ran straight out the front door and into my car. Strangely, as I drove away, The guy ran out the front door and around the side of the house. I pulled over after driving out of the neighborhood and called the police to let them know what happened in hopes that they could figure out what was going on. I didn't really know what the man's plan was, but I was confident enough that he was up to something. The officers later came by my house, and I gave them more information. They told me that the house I met him at had been empty for over a year, which made chills run through my body. Of course, though, I couldn't really give them much helpful information other than description of what the man looked like. Other than that, all they had to go off of were the weights he had put in the empty house, which may have had fingerprints on them. It worries me that he might still be out there, trying to lure people into abandoned homes. But I'm also glad that I was able to make it out of there before he did whatever it was that he had planned on doing. Back in college, I lived in a small, cheap 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate named Jason. We weren't exactly friends, just 2 students who split the rent. He mostly kept to himself, which I didn't mind, but something about him always felt a little off. At first, it was small things, like how he never seemed to go to class, yet I'd see his books and papers stacked neatly on his desk, or how he always locked his bedroom door, even when he just stepped into the kitchen for a snack. But then, it got weirder. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of Jason's door creaking open. Half asleep, I assumed he was just heading to the bathroom. But as I turned over, I caught a glimpse of him standing completely still in the hallway, just standing there, facing my open bedroom door. I didn't move, I didn't say anything, I just watched. After about 10 seconds, he turned and walked away. I told myself he was probably sleepwalking or just zoned out, but deep down, it didn't feel right. The next morning, I casually asked if he had trouble sleeping last night. He just stared at me for a second before shaking his head and mumbling, "No, I slept fine." Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more strange things. Sometimes I'd come home to find my door slightly open, even though I knew I had closed it. One time, my laptop was moved just an inch from where I had left it. Another time, I woke up to the sound of his door unlocking, but by the time I got up to check, the apartment was silent. Then, one day, Jason was just gone. I didn't see him leave. His door was locked like always. But after 3 days of not hearing a single sound from his room, I started to worry. I knocked on his door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Nothing. Eventually, I called our landlord, who came over with a spare key. When we finally got the door open, the room was completely empty. No furniture, no clothes, nothing. It was like he had never lived there at all. I checked our apartment lease, and his name was still on it. I even called his phone, but it was disconnected. I asked around, but no one at the college seemed to remember him. I even searched his full name online. Nothing. It was as if Jason had never existed. To this day, I have no idea who he really was, or what he was doing in my apartment.